Hello, my dears. I was very sorry not to be with you today. I trust that you were an excellent class for Mrs. McLeroy. She's such a great sub. I always feel good about having her teach you guys when I can't be there. I want to cover a few things with you since you read a lot of chapters Friday and Monday, and then you're going to read some more chapters tomorrow on Wednesday. So I don't want to come together in class on Thursday and be like, whoa, we have so many things to talk about. Some really important things happened in Friday and Monday's chapters, right? For one thing, Huck and Jim are going down the river now. The whole situation with Huck's dad happened, and a number of other things. But the first, I want to start with the end of your reading for today. The very end of chapter 11. Well, chapter 11 is kind of hilarious, isn't it? It's a little, in miniature, it's a little adventure of Huck's that reads like, like a humor story, like one of Twain's truly humorous stories, right? Huck is dressed up like a girl. And what do we know of Huck? The way he talks, the way he acts, like, do we really think he could even fool anyone? Of course, at the end of this situation, the woman says, you might fool a man, but you don't fool a woman. She gives him all these little tests, right? Like a boy would never catch something in his lap the way Huck did. A girl would have, like, caught in her skirt. So she has him throw something, like pretending to throw something at a rat to see if he throws like a boy or a girl. So it's just all very funny. But in the end, what does he learn from her? He learns that, well, first of all, there's a bounty out. And so everyone is out looking for him and for Jim. To get this money, this reward. And her husband and a friend or two of his are one of those people looking. And she tells him, yeah, they're out looking right now. That's why my husband ain't home. And they went out to Jackson's Island. Well, that's where Jim is waiting, and that's where their whole camp is and everything, right? So Huck had a choice in this moment. It's not portrayed here. He shows that he doesn't even really sit and wonder what he's going to do. He immediately runs to Jim. He could have just run away, right? But he runs to Jim. They're a team now. They're partners in this whole thing. This little poor, uneducated, literate, but close to illiterate white boy and this escaped slave. They're in this together. That's happened fast, hasn't it? As soon as Huck sees Jim a few chapters back, he says, I was glad to see him. And it wasn't like Tom Sawyer where he might have been glad because then they could have some fun and he could pick on Jim. He was glad to see him. So Huck already has some sense of liking Jim, right? Okay, so he runs back and it's pretty funny the way he says it. He's going back to warn him. I roused him out and says, get up and hump yourself, Jim. There ain't a minute to lose. They're after us. So if we were in class together today, I would have said, what is the most important word you read in all 7 of the chapters you read Friday and Monday? It's a very little word. It's us. They're after us. We're in this together. Think about it. This was written just a little bit like right after Reconstruction stopped in the South. So the rise of the KKK, Jim Crow laws, the rise of some really bad feeling toward freed Black Americans at the time. And it was set in the time period before the Civil War when people of African descent in America were enslaved, right? Us. We know. Whether or not Huck always treats Jim respectfully, we know on whose side he finds himself. So, thinking about that, I want to dig back a little. He talks, we hear several times about religion, right? We hear about the widow and her sister Miss Wilson's faith. They, like the widow Douglas, wants to teach Huck religion. Huck says, he actually says for a time he's happy with his father, even though his father has technically kidnapped him, and is hiding him so that he can't be rescued. This is bad stuff. This is really heavy stuff. And Huck is a kid, and so he's not presenting it to us. He's presenting it matter of fact, but almost has the makings of a horror movie, right? Trapped in this cabin. But he says for a time he's happy there because he gets really used to, again, not going to school, wearing raggedy old clothes, not having to wear shoes, being able to smoke. His dad lets him. So he's like, actually, this is not a bad life, except for the fact that my dad beats me. This is okay. So again, you get that between the lines, like, oh man, Huck. But he's pretty matter of fact about it. But he's also happy not to be kind of being given religion in the way the widow tries to, right? So throughout the book, pay attention to the people who call themselves Christians or who are church people or who are talking about the Bible versus Huck. Huck is not, as you know, he's not educated. Now I can't remember off the top of my head, but in the early chapters, is that she's talking to him about Moses, I think. Whoever it is she's talking to him about, he's listening to this story about this guy, and then he realizes, wait, he ain't even alive anymore? Moses is dead? I don't have no truck with dead people. Why would he matter to me? So Huck just doesn't, he has no Christian teaching, no biblical teaching, so that when he gets some, it's really confusing. He does have the idea, and this will come out, that church people and Christian people are good people, and that probably he should be like them, but he's always inclined not to be. But what we start to see, remember, Twain, well, he partly uses humor just to entertain, right? He's an entertainer. He also uses humor and satire to critique society. So he comes down at various times with a pretty heavy critique on church people, or people who talk about believing the Bible, but who also say own slaves, or even like with Jim, break their word to the slave and for a good bit of money are willing to sell them down the river, or various other things. It's not always connected to slavery. But and so Huck will find himself a number of times wanting to do the right thing, but he thinks he's doing the wrong thing because some of the church people wouldn't do it, right? Well, much later will come on toward the end of the book, an episode where Huck, he is in a situation where he could rescue Jim or he could give Jim up. And he has a battle within himself where he's so skewed. His view of truth and of goodness is so skewed, and the things God values, right? That he thinks, well, Jim is the widow's or the Miss Wilson's property, so I would be stealing from her if I gave Jim up. So I'll probably go to hell for that. And he's trying to be a good person, trying to be what he thinks is a good person, which would be someone who would turn Jim in so that he's not stealing property, because he knows that's wrong. It's wrong to steal, right? And he says, so I'm going to give you a spoiler here. It's one of the other, they're after us, and this other phrase. And so if any parents are around listening, I'm quoting from the book. And it's not using the word as a curse word, but as legitimately like he's willing to go to the bad place. He says, he just can't make himself do it. He can't make himself turn Jim in and do what he thinks is the right thing. He loves Jim. Jim is his friend. And he says, all right, then, I'll go to hell. And he rescues Jim. Right? His morality is so kind of, not twisted, but just skewed, his view of it. So he's got these good impulses, and Twain is trying to show that like, and critique the people in the church who don't have that same impulse. Anyway, but let's go back. We're still here towards the beginning, but it took a while for them to get on the river, right? I mean, they were down at Jackson's Island. Remember that? The test at the end of the unit in December. They're on Jackson's Island for a few days, and now they have to escape because they're being looked for on Jackson's Island. So now, in earnest, they're heading down the river. And you remember how this is a story with episodes, with adventures, right? So now they're heading down the river. Wherever they stop and go do something, there's going to be a little adventure. Might be a bigger one here that lasts longer, then a little one again between the two of them, and then a really long one that lasts several chapters. Oh my goodness, just wait. There are characters called the Duke and the King. Yeah. They're going to drive you nuts. but they teach something really big. But they go on, and that's part of the thing. Like, Huck and Jim can't shake him, but we're not there yet. They're heading down the river, and they're going to, you might think it's called Cairo, like in Egypt, but in the deep south, it's Cairo. They're heading for Cairo, and then they're going to try to catch the river, another river going back up. All right, let me flip back through and just make sure I catch everything. Like I said in class last Thursday, this chapter, chapter 5 and maybe 6 and 7 with Huck's dad, that could be a little triggering, and I would respect that, and I welcome any of you to talk to me if it was, or if it has made this book hard for you to read. Huck's dad is a real bad fellow, right? Judge Thatcher has figured that out. The widow Douglas have figured that out. But there's a new judge in town, and that judge wants to reform Pap. That judge wants to think. He says something about, well, I don't want to separate children from their parents, and so so he just doesn't. He puts him right back in Pap's hands, Huck, right back in his father's hands, right? And then what does he do? I mean, it's funny, but also sad, and another critique of Twain's on society. This new judge and his wife, they just want to see a bad man turn into a good man. They want him reformed, so they give him nice clothes and dinner, and what does Pap do? He kind of swindles them. He tricks them. He shakes his hand. He says, look at it. He holds out his hand. Look at it, gentlemen and ladies all. Take a hold of my hand. Shake it. This is what is the hand that was the hand of a hog, but it ain't so no more. Now it's the hand of a man that started on a new life, and I'll die before I go back to my old ways, basically. And so they're so happy. The judge's wife even kisses Pap's hand. They've made a change. They've done something good, And what does he do? He climbs out the window that night, gets so drunk that he falls down and breaks his arm, and then the judge knows that Pap was never truly reformed. But this is also a critique. Who should that judge have been looking out for? Pap or Huck? The child, right? So there's a critique, even though it's funny in a sad way. Right. All right, chapter 6. So, let's see. Pap catches Huck a couple times and thrashes him, trying to keep him from going to school. Pap is really upset that Huck is bettering himself better than his father. Let's see. Every time he got money, he got drunk. Every time he got drunk, he raised Cain around town. And every time he raised Cain, he got jailed. And that kind of works out because then he can't come after Huck for a while, right? So let's see. He's trying to run him off, and then finally, Pap does capture Huck and takes him to this cabin where he locks him in, and Huck says it was kind of lazy and jolly, laying off comfortable all day, smoking and fishing, no books to study, my clothes got to be all rags and dirt. Didn't ever see how I had liked it so well in the widow's uncomfortable clothes. Like, this was great. I didn't want to go back home no more. I had stopped cussing because the widow didn't like it, but now I took to it again because Pap didn't have any objections. It was pretty good times up there, take it all around. But by and by, Pap got too handy with his hickory, and I couldn't stand it. I was all over welts. He just says that matter-of-factly and keeps moving on. He's being beaten, right? All right. So, Pap comes and goes. One day he locks him in the cabin and is gone for 3 days. So Huck says, I'm going to have to find a way to escape to get out of here. And he does. He saws a hole in the cabin, and Pap comes back. There's a really rough night where Pap comes at him, and Huck is afraid for his life. And so after that, the river is rising because it's springtime. Lots of stuff coming down the river on it, and there's a canoe. Huck catches it, he hides it, and then he has this huge plan where he escapes. He even uses a pig's blood to convince. Again, if this were not told humorously, it would have the makings of a scary movie, right? And so we can read between for that, So Huck, I realize I'm way covering this over. We may chat about it a little bit on Thursday, but But Huck escapes, right? He floats in the canoe. Um, there are a few moments in chapter 7 where you see that Huck, for all that he's uneducated, and he likes to even talk about himself, is not like in school. He says, the moon was so, let's see, he's pretty tired. He lay down in the canoe. He woke up, didn't know where he was for a minute. He was a little scared. Then I remembered the river looked miles and miles across. The moon was so bright, I could have counted the drift logs and went slipping along, black and still, hundreds of yards out from shore. Everything was dead quiet, and it looked late and it smelled late. You know what I mean? I don't know the words to put it in. It goes on like this for a little bit. It's really lyrical in his own uneducated voice. He says smelt instead of smelled. Huck kind of has a poetic bent, and I just think that's really neat that Twain gives him that. So let's see. Okay, he's going downstream. He's just floating down and down. He finally gets to Jackson's Island. We'll skip over the part. There's a boat that comes down the river where they're sounding the river, like kind of dropping explosives to see if his drowned body will raise up, and they'll find his body. So that's gruesome, and Huck is this kid. He's having fun watching it happen. But there's something else that's disturbing, right? There are, along with people he recognizes, like Pep, the Judge Thatcher, Becky Thatcher, who is from Tom Sawyer, a friend. Tom Sawyer and his Aunt Polly, and Sid and Mary. We're going to meet Polly much later in the book. She's important. Tom's Aunt Polly. And plenty more, but there were also like ladies and gentlemen on the boat. Like it was an excursion. Oh, let's go see if we see it. We want to see a corpse floating in the water, you know. So again, it's dark humor, and it's Twain criticizing society. Like, how interested were they in protecting the boy when he was alive? But they're really interested in seeing his body if they can. All right. So he's being looked for. He knows he's not going to be there. They're not going to find him. He knows he's not going to be caught. So he's watching. He forages. He discovers a campfire and then he sees someone sleeping. He's scared for a minute. And then he realizes it was Miss Watson's Jim. I bet I was glad to see him. Of course, Jim thinks Huck's a ghost for a few minutes, but he did think he was dead. So we know he's superstitious. So we'll give him that. But it's interesting. He makes him understand that he's not dead. He's alive. And I was so glad to see Jim. I weren't lonesome now. Again, there's a little bit of friendship, even if he doesn't recognize it. A little bit of recognizing Jim's another person to be with. He says, I told him I weren't afraid of him telling the people where I was. Well, why is that? Well, Jim's hiding for the sake of his life, right? So they're both in the same boat for different reasons. Literally in the same boat in a minute, haha. But right, neither of them can be caught at risk of both of their lives for different reasons. All right, so let's see. All right, they're going along. They're talking, interesting stuff, good stuff, but also, I want to talk about the snake, guys. On Thursday. Remind me, make sure, because we need to talk about this prank Huck plays on Jim, because in a few chapters he's going to play another prank on him, and it is going to be more serious, and it's going to make things take a turn relationally between them. So it's important that Huck plays this snake prank on Jim. But I'm going to leave that for now, so I can wrap this up. Oh, they come across a house, and there's a dead man, a dead body, right? Jim spots that right away. He says, Huck, don't look at the face. Don't look. It'll bother you. If they find other things like the women's clothes that Huck uses to trick the woman into, and a number of other, and a wooden leg. And it's pretty funny because Huck says, we only found the one leg. We didn't find the other one. Well, probably if you're a person using a wooden leg, it's because you're missing one leg, but you have another leg to walk on, right? There's not another one. So you get these little glimmers of like he's a kid. He doesn't really get how things work, right? But they take the leg. It's too short for Jim and too long for Huck, but they might be able to use it. And I think that's an instance of Twain slurring the nub, right? He never stops and is like, oh, this is so funny. He's just like, and then this happens, and we found the leg. There wasn't a second leg, but we took this leg, even though it wouldn't fit either of us. It might come in useful. Like, and it just goes on. And you're left thinking, wait a second, that's never going to come in useful. Right? But okay. All right. So we're leading up to where I've already talked about chapter 11, where he goes in and talks to the woman. Let's see. You guys are going to remind me to talk about the snake. What's the significance? Let's talk about this tomorrow too. It's the significance of Jim saying, I reckon this man in the house, when they find the house floating by, remember the river's rising. So it's up at maybe close to flood level. So house goes by. Come in, Huck, but don't look at his face. It's too ghastly. Think he's been dead 2 or 3 days. I didn't look at the body at all. Jim throwed some old rags over him, but he needn't have done it. I didn't want to see the body. And so then they find all the other stuff. So here's what we need to think about. What's the story behind this story? You can ask that question about all of Huck Finn. What's the story behind the story? What is Jim doing for Huck and not showing him the body? For one thing, maybe he's protecting himself, protecting Huck, being a little fatherly, not wanting him to see something that would traumatize him, that would be hard. Why else might he be hiding the body? We'll just think about that. And then let's see. Oh, the leg. A wooden leg. The straps was broke off it, but barring that, it was a good enough leg. Though it was too long for me, not long enough for Jim, and we couldn't find the other one, though we hunted all around. Anyway, I just like that. Let's see. All right, and then here's one. I'll end on this. Then I'm at the end of chapter 9. I'm gonna skip 10 for now, where they're getting ready to go and send Huck into town to find out what's going on. When we was ready to shove off, we was a quarter of a mile below the island. It was pretty broad daylight, so anyone could have looked in and see. There's Huck Finn. There's a black man, an escaped slave, right? So I made Jim lie down in the canoe and cover up with the quilt that they had got taken out of the house. Because if he sat up, people could tell he was black a good ways off. What's Huck doing right there for Jim? He's protecting him. Right? So, friendship, and soon enough we'll see sacrifice. And I think that's good enough. So keep this in mind. They're after us. Keep this in mind. Huck wanting to protect Jim by not making him get caught. Keep this in mind. Jim wanting to protect Huck from seeing the dead man. Also, just Huck showing up and saying, I sure was glad to see Jim when he finds him on the island. All right, guys. I know this was long, but I wanted you to give you some things to think about. Now you're going to dive into these next chapters, and we're going to listen to the following chapter after your reading for today on Thursday, tomorrow, because it's a pretty big deal. And we'll discuss it in class and other things as well. Oh, yeah, reading quiz coming up on Thursday. So make sure you're caught up, all right? If you can't get to any of your other work, make sure you're caught up in your reading. All right, see you tomorrow.